Street Part 2, 1978 is the second in the Fear Street trilogy that has come to Netflix. The third part, which is 1666, is gonna be out this Friday. I've already reviewed the first part of this trilogy, which was 1994. You can check that out on my channel right now. Today I'm talking about Part 2, again, which is 1978. You've got Ted Sutherland and what's her name? God damn it, what's her name? Sadie something is in this movie, and then there's another girl whose last name is Rudd or Rude. I promise you I'm not doing this on purpose. I really do want to memorize these people's names, but for whatever reason, when the camera starts rolling, I space and I completely forget, and it makes me look like such an asshole. Regardless, this film takes place in 1978, as the title would suggest. A fun summer at Camp Nightwing in 1978, and then all of a sudden there is terror afoot, and it becomes a brutal struggle for survival. Because now all of these kids, these teens, these people at this Camp Nightwing are being hunted by some evil dude with an axe. And so now they have to try to survive the night, and that's really all I can say about this movie without giving everything away via spoilers. If you guys have seen my first review for 1994, which was only a couple of days ago, I did enjoy that movie. I liked it. I thought it was a nice throwback movie. A lot of people in their reviews compared it to Scream. It did take place in the 90s, so it made sense that Scream would be the initial comparison that a lot of people would run to. I also said in that review that I felt like even though it took place in the 90s and it was a throwback and all of that stuff is cool, I also still felt like a film that could have taken place in modern day and it wouldn't have really changed the story or affected anything. I feel the opposite about Part 2, because this movie is through and through a 1970s style movie. Everything about this movie kind of enhances the period that they're telling this story, and the music choices, which by the way are awesome. The way that characters talk, their conversations that they have with each other, the clothing, it basically screams late 70s. And in that sense, I felt like the time period was much more of an active character in the storytelling for this movie, and I do think that is a slight improvement on 1994. It's not just about looking scared for acting in a horror movie. Sometimes it's also about projecting that empathy to the audience and making the audience put themselves in your shoes and feel what you feel. And that's not just during the horror scenes, that's during all of the other scenes too. So from that perspective, I do think all the actors and actresses in this film give really good performances considering that context. Standout is most definitely the two sisters in the film. Again, one is Sadie Sink, is that her name? I think I just remembered her name. It's Sadie Sink. I think it's Sadie Sink. The other one, again, I can't remember her name completely, but I thought those were the two best performances in the movie. Similar to the first film, I like that this film has actual stakes to it. I like the fact that the longer the film goes on, the slasher quality of the film becomes fun and unpredictable, and you have no idea who's gonna survive scene by scene. So when you have a horror movie and you have a lot of gore, you have a lot of violence, you have a lot of really gruesome kills, those are elevated and made even more intense by the fact that the stakes continue to rise. You have absolutely no idea who's gonna walk out of a scene dead or alive, and I think that creates a very fun feel. If you're looking for a late 70s slasher flick, I think that this film definitely delivers on the nostalgia and the feeling that you would get from watching those type of movies. Now, you do have to deal a little bit with the cliches that come as a result of that. As far as building on the bigger story, the mythology that was established in the first film, it builds on it but doesn't overbuild on it, you know? It hints at some things, it teases some things. You're gonna hear a lot about Sarah Fear. You've heard that name a lot in these first two movies. Sets up a third film that looks like easily the most interesting of the three movies that we could have gotten. I can't wait to see that one. Again, it should be up on Netflix this Friday. The biggest thing that I think this movie has going against it is the pacing. It is definitely not paced as well as the first film was. This movie, pretty much the entire first act and some parts of the second act, is all about build up, it's all about setup. It's all about kind of spending time with these characters, and normally I'd be okay with that. I'd be okay with a solid build up. Unfortunately, the character work here is kind of inconsistent. There are some characters that they give you enough to where you're kind of invested in their story and you do want to see where they end up by the end of the film, but then there are other characters that the film decides to spend a lot of time with. Some of these other characters, they're just not nearly as compelling or interesting, and you feel like the film is kind of wasting your time making you spend all this time with all these other characters. When the character work is not nearly as gripping as I think the film wanted it to be, it does make the first half of this movie feel like a bit of a slog to get through. Even with some of the iffy pacing in this movie, there are still plenty of great gory slasher moments in the second half that had me screaming at my TV.
Run, bitch! Run!
I have two tiny questions that pop up during the storytelling in this movie that are not really answered by the movie, and as a result, they're just sitting in my head and I don't really have an explanation for them. One of these questions is a character-related one that has to do with one of the main characters, and another one is like a story choice that the story decides to make to basically kind of spare a character. That's really all I want to say about it. These questions are just kind of sitting there and they're not really answered, and it was just kind of frustrating that the movie didn't spend enough time on these questions that I had. I don't know necessarily if the movie would be better or worse, but I feel like I wouldn't have these questions and then I wouldn't bring this up in the review. So it does feel like a valid point to me. Fear Street Part 2 1978 was definitely a solid enough follow-up to the first one. I'm gonna give it the same rating of Silver Age Man of Steel. Which one did you prefer? Did you prefer Part 1 or did you prefer Part 2? Let me know in the comment section down below. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and if you like what you see, tell me how you feel and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace.